So welcome to the SecureDynamics TechCast. With me, I have two former guests. I have Mike Manrod, who is the CISO at Grand Canyon Education. Welcome back, Mike.
Thank you, Ashwin.
And I have Daniel Shuler, who is the CISO at Exponent. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, I'm going to turn the podium to you because you came up with this idea of, I call it the 20th century phishing, which is really based on the less obvious mechanisms, which is text and voice. So, talk a little bit about, especially in your environment. And I was reading an article which talks about the fact that most people are inherently less tuned in to the phishing attack coming through an SMS versus an email. So talk about the mental makeup that we have where we're heightened awareness when it comes to apps and email, but then it suddenly falls off when it's a voice call or an SMS.
It really is pretty interesting because we pick up this device here and we've got email, we've got all these capabilities on this device, many of them the same ones we have on our company laptop. And yet it can be pretty elusive to get the same controls. But even if you've done that, you have all that inbound inspection and all the things we do to protect email, but there's very little to protect that malicious link via SMS or that phone call that's social engineering somebody to take an action, or the one that's just common are the robo-dials constantly sucking up our time trying to sell us things. I mean, it's really pernicious.
So Daniel, I know you work with a lot of clients. So I mean, what is like your viewpoint? What do you see in terms of what you advice do you give, and what do people typically fall prey for?
Yeah, no, that's great, and I wish I had the shining solution to this, but it's one of those that the solution is continually elusive and somewhat changing. I hate to do it, but I harp on the awareness, and I definitely include these types of examples in the trainings that we talk about with our users, just to get them aware that everything that does come through that device, maybe it is a trusted device, might not be able to be trusted. I mean, I just share my personal frustrations with the number and the volume of requests or texts or calls that comes through. And, I find a varying response depending on how close it hits home with folks. But overall, we do get involved with the, somebody sent me this link. Is there anything I can do about it? But just to echo the control piece there, like, yes, it's rewarding when I can go into Exchange and say, everybody that got that link, I'm going to address that, or through my web controls to say, I'm just not going to let anybody go to that link. With a phone and the many flavors we have, business provided, personal provided devices, we can't necessarily just say that's not going to be able to ever go to that link. So, yeah, talking around it a little, but it's definitely a problem.
So one of the things, I mean, I live in California, and clearly there's earthquake notifications, there's fire notifications. So I've signed up for half a dozen things. Now, quote unquote, being in cybersecurity doesn't make me any more aware if I get a notification saying, hey, there's a fire 30 miles burning, click this link to put your address over there and notify you. I would have probably clicked that link, right? So, and Mike, you mentioned this, right? There aren't a whole lot of protections. Why isn't the cybersecurity industry, the vendors, actually doing something about it, knowing that this is one of those things that could easily compromise anybody?
Well, there are a lot of products out there and some good ones. Like on my phone right now, I'm running Lookout, which provides some URL filtering, and corporate versions of it allow you to block that link. We've obviously MDM, as most corporate issued devices have a good MDM type product governing them. But the problem is most of us have a lot of BYOD sprawl we have to deal with, which is of course a concern. And then there's always the debate of, when you're working with user bases on a mobile device, say you have a traveling salesperson, it is a company device or a personal device with company data, but sometimes there's some reluctance to have the big brother is watching on that mobile device that they're using on personal time. So the lines get really gray. part of it, as Daniel kind of alluded to with awareness, part of it is a technical problem, but part of it is a people problem.
So, Mike, talking about what Daniel talking about what Mike was alluding to right now, especially where people are at home, and I've heard some of these stories over here where you actually get a call from IT, right? And so is the threat level suddenly gone up? I have tenfold, hundredfold right now. With who do you trust? And you can't do a 2FA. If Mike, quote unquote, is my ID and he calls me over here, it's like, hey, Mike, here is your OTP and send it back to me. Then I'm going to authenticate you. So is there a human element to this in terms of training or retraining end users, if you will, in terms of how they need to think and adapt in this remote work hybrid environment?
A huge transition, right? The idea that this level of trust and our almost level of visibility to who we trust is changing, right? I'm not sitting at my desk with my nice enterprise phone with a nice big screen on it that says this is the IT help desk calling. I'm relying on my cell phone or home phone or however the users are interacting with that to do that. It is a topic, again, just awareness to our users of making sure they understand and know who they're talking to. But it was a more detailed and in-depth discussion with our customer support teams to understand how are they validating that they're talking to the right person. With the restrictions of data that we can expose to all of those different entities, we have to come with some creativity of how we're actually going to do that. But the landscape is changing. Threat actors know that, right? People are at home now. They don't have those typical things. So in their sense, why not try and take advantage of them?
So one last question, sticking with you, Daniel, for a minute, in terms of, let's say there's an attack that was discovered, somebody fell prey to it. Are there best practice processes in place to kind of use that as an example of using that back into training or using that to up level your URL filtering, whatever the case for compromise was, versus letting that go as an incident and then not really becoming safer as a result of that?
I hear Mike say this all the time, never let a good incident go wasted, right? I'm sure I botched that, but the idea of grabbing the screenshots, grabbing the examples of what my actual users have gone through, standard practice. And I just repeat and show those as many times. And when I say, hey, Bob over here just experienced this, people know Bob and they know that he's a smart guy and this is what he experienced, and maybe they might experience that same thing. So that definitely goes a long way. The idea around our ability to interact with these, to me, is just a personal frustration. I'm consistently frustrated when somebody calls up and says, hey, I got this spam call, or hey, I got this spam text. Can we stop these? I don't have a good answer for that. So, it all just comes back down to that awareness.
So, Mike, last question to you again. Given the wide demographic that you have to deal with across the entire university, is how do you kind of cross boundaries between IT and schools and students in terms of what they can and should report, and how do you bring that back into best practices?
So I think the awareness piece of that is key, and I think Daniel covered that well. So I'll probably fast forward to the best practices aspect, which is there's things that are being done on a large scale, such as the initiatives for Stir and Shaken. You definitely check out like RFC 8588 on kind of defining the new ways to solve this problem. But those are still far off. Tactically, things you can do now that will help a lot, whether you're a school or some other type of environment, is one, block your own DID range from calling back in. In other words, if I'm 1231234 and I own the entire 123 prefix, I shouldn't accept outside untrusted calls that also have a 123 prefix, because that's a really common technique of attackers. The other is, whether you're an end user or protecting end users, products are good. There are apps that stop robo-dialers. They're not perfect. and there's apps that can stop people from clicking on malicious links, or, well, they can't stop them from clicking, but at least you have a fighting chance of helping contain it once they do. And I think the main thing we need to take away is we need a better trust model for voice and telephony in general. It's been well defined by many for years with stir and shaken, but it's got to get out there. And as we mourn the loss of Sean Connery, I think we should do him one last favor and make sure we talk about stir and shaken. Do state shaken and stirred to protect our telephony.
Yeah. On that note, yeah, may Sean Connery rest in peace, and onwards to the James Bond saga. So thanks, Mike, and thanks, Daniel, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.